Three, it's slowed down. Two, one, we should be live.
All right. Good morning. Good morning, Justice Beat family, and welcome back for our seventh season of the Justice Beat Talk Show, episode number one. And today we have with us our associate producer, Mr. Kavan Nakai, and he is a social justice practicum student from Adler University. And he will be doing our interviewing today with our guest, Ms. Megan McDrew, who is the executive director and founder of the Transformative Justice Center. All right, take it away, Kavan.
Hello, everybody, and welcome, Megan. I just wanted to start our conversation today by welcoming you to the show and asking you to just introduce and share a little bit about yourself and the Transformative Justice Center in your own words. What are your missions? What are your values?
All right, thank you. Thank you so much for having me. Hello, Justice Beat family. My name is Megan McDrew. I'm located here in Monterey, California. A little bit about me. I studied sociology up there at Humboldt State University and ended up pursuing a career in community college teaching. I've been all over the world. I've always had sort of a heart of service and humanitarian work. About 10 years ago, I was offered the opportunity to spend a weekend in San Quentin. I didn't spend the night, but I went in for 2 days. I did a lot of emotional literacy work with the incarcerated residents there. We did some yoga, mindfulness. It was with a program called GRIP, which is Guiding Rage into Power. And suffice to say, since that weekend in 2013, I've been going into prison ever since. I often say, ironically, in the cold, dark, cement filled space of prison, I somehow come very much alive. I ended up working at San Quentin as a volunteer for the subsequent 2 years with a program called Trust, which is teaching responsibility utilizing sociological theory. And that delved into me moving to this area where I am now for the last 7 years, working as a community college community college instructor teaching inside 2 prisons here in the Central Valley of California. One is the CTF Soledad, which is the Correctional Training Facility of Soledad. And then we have Salinas Valley Prison. Salinas Valley Prison is considered one of the most higher level prisons. They go from 1 to 4, with 5 being a supermax prison, which aren't found in California. Salinas Valley Prison is a level 4 prison based on, I guess you could say, the level of violence you can find in a prison like that. And CTF Soledad is a level 2. So for the last 6 years, I've been teaching sociology, both inside 2 prisons and also at UC Santa Cruz, as well as UC Merced. I found that bringing people into prison, namely my college students, I started doing that about once a quarter to discuss a shared book between my incarcerated students at the community college inside the prison and UC Santa Cruz students. We'd often read Just Mercy by Brian Stevenson, who is one of my mentors. And we read another book by Victor Rios. We explore various kind of justice-based books. That experience for the students, just going in one time, I witnessed it being really life-changing. They changed their career. They became really passionate about prison reform and abolition, became really passionate about incarcerated rights. And I ended up creating this program. I morphed to this program, which was originally called Exercises in Empathy, created by a couple that was running the program out of a private high school in Salinas. They were bringing in high school boys, for about 4 weeks to read classical literature like Shakespeare, John Steinbeck, books like that. They ended up dropping the program about 3 years ago, and I picked it up, wrote a grant to the California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation to help support the program so I could hire some staff. And I ended up creating this 8-week program, which is called Empathy in Action. And over that program is my center, which is the Transformative Justice Center of Monterey County. The center, if you were to see my website, transformativejusticecenter.org, really houses the program. The program Empathy in Action is really the center of the center. And again, as of now, for the last 18 months, I've been bringing in about 30 people at a time on a weekly basis into CTF Soledad to really have profound learning opportunities with the incarcerated residents within that prison. My goal with the center is to offer more, I call them transformative reentry services. I don't want to have this model of reintegration where it still kind of mimics the prison system. I'm really focusing on offering people coming out of the justice system with trauma-informed wellness services. And also I'll be serving as a referral service to assist with housing and documentation assistance and employment. So that's a little bit about me and what I've been working on the last few years.
Wow, it sounds like you've been working on quite a lot, and it sounds like you've been really making a really good impact for your local community.
Yeah, it feels like that. Thank you.
The last week when we were talking about it and you had talked about working in a prison, I just kind of wanted to start at the beginning and then slowly move like timeline wise. Could you just tell us, when working within the prison system, what were your first initial experiences and gut feelings?
You know, I remember very palatably going in my first time and really shaking, like feeling this jitteriness. Like I didn't, that the prison is so ominous. So it's still a little early in California. It just has this kind of dark cloud over it, and you never know, given its invisible nature, it's usually far off the highway, surrounded by barbed wire and metal and fencing and whatnot. You only really understand the carceral system from what you've read or what you've seen in the media or what you've maybe imagined. I don't have any personal experience of even a family member incarcerated. So I didn't know where I was going, and I just knew that I was just following my heart. I knew that the people inside these places were humans and deserved to be visible and to be understood. Coming from a sociological background, I understand that people go to prison for a number of reasons outside of our own personal choices. So I went in with a big open heart and open mind, but I was scared. And just the first hand I shook, and then the next hand, and after meeting 50 incarcerated men at San Quentin, I felt immediately at ease, and I felt very safe, ironically. But I will have to say, probably for the next couple of years, every time I'd leave the prison, I'd have a headache. I was just taking in so much and understanding so much and connecting so many dots between social inequalities and why people end up in prison. And my mind was just going a million miles a minute, and it was breaking down all these stigmas and misconceptions and fears that I had that I didn't know I had. And it was a real unveiling of truth for me. So again, that's why I just kept going back in to learn more and to understand more and to give more. And going in as a person from the public into prison and being present with the incarcerated residents and looking them in the eyes and shaking their hands and listening and sharing has a really transformative effect on anybody. So that ended up being my experience down the line, but my initial experience was quite kind of nerve-wracking and full of anxiety, like most people I bring in. The second they go in, all that kind of gets dispelled, and you do feel like you're in a comfortable space.
You mentioned that your experiences kind of made you self-reflect and analyze some of the stereotypes and biases that you once had that you never knew you had. Do you feel comfortable sharing what kind of biases that you once held that you no longer held?
Yeah, I think it boils down to the environment in prison being one of a lot of violence, and people that are housed in there being really violent. They have this, they're often say like we're not monsters like people portray us to be. I knew people inside prison aren't monsters, so to speak, but from what I'd seen in shows like Cops, I grew up in the 80s, all these sort of war on drug, tough on crime shows portrayed people in prison just being really animalistic. A lot of assault, a lot of sexual assault, a lot of abuse, banging on the cell. And I don't know, I had this idea of going into prison and it being just a really wild, violent place, full of really angry people. And what I found when I went in was it's full of really resilient, humorous, wise, intelligent, strong individuals who, not everybody's on the path of rehabilitation, but of all the men and women I've met in incarceration the last 10 years, everybody I met has been really focused on growth and learning and changing. So, I had the vision of the officers also being a certain way. And while there's many that fall into that category of being almost gang-like and dominating and power hungry, a lot of them are there to do good. So all those sort of misconceptions and stereotypes that I gained from media were definitely, they kind of proved not to be true in that environment.
Yeah, it seemed like a very humanizing, humbling experience. And previously, you mentioned that you're working on a trauma-informed wellness approach, and that makes sense because obviously, not only do these people who are going into the prison system already have substantial amounts of trauma, but this prison system itself re-traumatizes them, and maybe some people like traumatizes them for the first time. So, could you talk
Mhm.
more about what is a trauma-informed approach in your perspective?
A trauma-informed approach, in my perspective, focuses on choice and safety and accountability. So we delve into conversations in my program that are very deep and introspective and often painful, but there's always a choice. I don't make anyone answer any questions. I try to guide people to their own truth in a natural way. When it comes to teaching something like breath work or yoga or mindfulness, we always want there to be an aspect of consent. We want people to never feel like they're forced. We use certain language that allows people to feel safe. As far as wellness services, when people are coming out of prison, they call it, there's a new term that's post-traumatic prison disorder, PTPD. And a lot of research is being done by a woman that was incarcerated for about 18 years down in Riverside. Her name's Anastasia Schmidt. She's out now pursuing a PhD at Riverside, and she's a very impressive young lady that came up with this term. And she told me, no matter how hard you try, no matter if you're incarcerated for 5 years or 30 years, once you get out, it's almost impossible to leave that place of prison behind. It gets under your skin. There's always going to be some aspect of trauma that comes with it. Because of just the nature of incarceration and the nature of the architecture of the building, the way the cells are designed, the power, the unequal power that between the officers and the incarcerated residents. So when people come out, my goal with my center is to be able to offer, as I say, trauma-informed wellness services. So services that acknowledge that they're coming in with PTSD, PTPD, and using certain language, bringing up, words around consent and choice and safety. I'll have a safe space for yoga, for mindfulness, for breath work. A lot of these guys have never had something like sound healing, which has become sort of an esoteric Western thing around here, only offered to people that can afford it, which happens, more or less ends up being white middle-class folks. So I want to offer them these unique opportunities to really grow from the inside and evolve from the inside before they need to go out and tackle a job and relationships and employment. So I do have a life coach on my staff. I have an art therapist, so we'll be offering programs like services like that too.
Your program sounds very akin to like a group therapy session. I was wondering, do you guys offer any sort of counseling services at the moment, or is that something you're looking forward to offering in the future?
Yeah, that's something I'd love to offer in the future. As of now, the program runs. I'm the lead facilitator, and I did develop the curriculum and all the readings and the prompts that we explore. It mimics what I would say is group therapy. We usually have around 50 to 70 incarcerated residents. And as I said before, about 25 to 30 members from the public. About 2/3 of those are university students from various classes I've taught at UC Santa Cruz or Hartnell College, a community college I work at through the prison system. And then many have been joining from members from the public. So now, happily, I probably have about 4 or 5 ladies in their 60s and 70s. I have a couple gentlemen from the community. So we run the program in a therapeutic sense, but we don't offer direct counseling from like MFT or something. I believe that all of those 80 to 100 people in the room are all teachers, we're all healers, we all have our own expertise and life experiences that can guide these conversations and lend to therapeutic conversations. So we're all experts in our own ways, and a lot of these students come in with so much academic experience and so much knowledge from their studies that they dig into and guide the men. But it truly is a mentorship program with the volunteers really mentoring and holding space for the men, and the men really providing a lot of mentorship, especially to the younger students. It becomes a very symbiotic relationship where everybody's needs are met in a really unique way. Yeah, it's a beautiful thing to watch unfold.
Yeah, no, community health, I think, is very important, and I think it'll reduce a lot of the pressures on our hospitals and any government services, especially if people know that they can trust in their community, they can go to them, they can ask for this kind of help. So it sounds great. It sounds like a great foundation.
Mhm.
I had a little bit of a question. You mentioned sound healing earlier. Some people might not know what that is. Could you explain that a little bit?
Oh yeah. So I'm also a certified yoga teacher. I've been practicing yoga for about 20 years. I've been teaching at the Veterans Affair Clinic here in Marina, California, with the Employee Wellness Program. But sound healing is not something that I do personally, but I have actually brought a sound healer into prison with me. What she did was bring some music, which didn't actually really work because of the sound system. So we had to play something else. But all the men laid down on these prison supplied blankets, and we had about 70 in the room. And she did a combination of talking and singing with breath work. So they were doing this really kind of powerful inhale and exhale for about 30 minutes. And along with her singing and her talking, playing a few instruments, and the men started having this out of body experience. Some of them were like reaching their arms up in the air and shaking. I saw a lot of tears going down their face. After that whole session was over, she slowly kind of brought them back to sitting up and talking about their experience. And many of them said it was the most profound healing experience of their life. They were able to, when you really go within in this sense of deep solitude, it does something within your brain. And I mean, my metaphor is I talk about the headwaters of India. I spent quite a bit of time in India studying and doing some fellowship education work. And at the headwaters of any river, where a river begins, is considered the holiest part of the land. It's where the beginning, the water comes out and starts going towards the ocean, right? So the headwaters of the river is considered the purest part of the river. It's the cleanest part of the river. It's right where it begins. And I equate that to us as human beings when we're first born, as infants, as newborns, as little children. We're in our purest state of being. We haven't been tainted or polluted by life, by experiences of life, by pain and suffering and shame and guilt and hurt and violence and harm. Just as a river goes and flows down towards the ocean, it gets full of chemicals and pesticides and garbage and in India, human bodies and waste. Until it reaches its source, and then it becomes one with everything. But I use this in prison a lot to say, like, it's hard to swim upstream. There's a lot of pressure when if you ever try to swim up a river, you're not going to get very far. But really, the goal of mindfulness or breath work or sound healing or even any kind of healing wellness practice that one might delve into, to me, and with the work I do, is to really learn how to swim upriver and swim through all that pain and shame and hurt and trauma. So you realize once you get to the headwaters of yourself that you really are this pure, innocent, beautiful, untainted being. And you can be that again. And a lot of men, they have to do that hard work. The incarcerated population has so much trauma. They don't come from beautiful pasts. A lot of them come from the most hurtful paths you can believe. So our work is to really swim upstream and get them to realize that they are that good, and they are worthy, and they are powerful, and they deserve respect and healing just like everybody else.
Wow, that That was incredibly profound. I actually didn't know that you spent some time in India. I'm Punjabi, which means the land of the five rivers. So
Wow.
it touched me a little bit, a lot more than I expected it to.
Oh, I'm
Um,
glad. I spent
you
some time in Punjab.
say that again? Sorry,
I
my
say I
bad.
spent some time in Punjab, because I think that's where the Golden
Yeah.
Temple is. Yeah,
Yes.
beautiful.
Yes. I need to
Mhm.
go back. But what did you do in India? What did you study?
Oh, so I was with the American Indian Fellowship Foundation. That's was created by Bill Clinton, believe it or not, and that was back in 2008 or nine. And they sent me to the high Himalayas. I lived in an ashram for a year, and my role was to study high education, experiential education in the mountains. It was this man, his name was Sergi. He was more or less like a guru. He was running this school, and he was one of the first people in India to really explore what they called experiential education. So much of learning, especially in developing countries, is very rote. It's very robotic, kind of call and response. And so this gentleman was the first one to use paper to teach fractions, or to to have students play music in the classroom. He always started every day at school with meditation and singing. So I really studied him and his methods and came up with a workbook that was turned into a manual and then distributed to about 100 schools in the mountains of India. And so I did that for about a year, and in between that, I studied yoga and went to a Vipassana meditation retreat, 10 days of silence. I hiked to Mount Everest with my father. So we did some adventures in that area. And then I came back and tried to apply everything I learned to what I'm doing now.
Yeah, you mentioned experiential education. Have you applied that at all to your work in the work that you're doing right now?
I mean, I have. I try to make, as I think one of my students is on the podcast, I try to make my classes both on campus and in the prison experiential, in the sense of not just standing up there and lecturing. So we always do group work and presentations and activities, and yeah, I try to make the learning come alive. Uh, One thing I did quite a bit in class is called a jigsaw. So I'd bring in essays written by my incarcerated students, and they're all very thematic. I have essays around racial injustice, social class inequalities, family life and incarceration. I even had my incarcerated students write their own eulogies because I taught death and dying. And then I had my death and dying students grade their eulogies. But I bring in these essays to my students based on whatever class I was teaching. And they'd read essays about the incarcerated community. Each one would have a different essay by a gentleman or woman, and then the students would teach each other about the lives of the person they read. So it ended up being a big learning experience. So I do stuff like that. I try to make all my classes experiential and not just standing there and telling them, what I know or what I think they should learn.
You sound like a wonderful professor. That's honestly, I would love to learn that way. Academia is very strict and very, one-centered tunnel vision.
It
Um,
is.
Last week you actually told us that you helped create a book, and the book is called Social Justice Autobiographies, Inequality, Injustice, and America's Incarcerated. And it's a collection over 100 autobiographies written by prisoners all across the United States, available on Amazon for anyone who's listening.
Mhm.
Um, can you tell us why tell us the rationale for creating such a book? What was the process like, and what was some of the most profound lessons you've learned from the stories of incarcerated individuals?
Yeah, so I taught a class for about 6 years at UC Santa Cruz called Social Justice. And one of the assignments for my campus-based students was to write their social justice autobiography. So I pulled a bunch of quotes by famous justice seekers and had them analyze those quotes in relation to their life. And I essentially had them write an essay around what sort of injustices impacted their life, and how did they navigate those. So that could be injustices within the family, could be injustices within the criminal justice system, or with the police, with religion, military, the government, immigration, uh, so on and so forth, the education system. So reading the students' essays was was interesting. Not a lot, a lot of my students at Santa Cruz come from privileged backgrounds, so they talked about their privilege rather than too many injustices impacting them. But I started seeing that a lot of my students that identify as Black or brown had a lot more injustices in their life than some of my lighter skinned students or my students that had more were part of a higher social class growing up. So I started noodling on that, and I ended up having some of my incarcerated students through Hartnell College write their social justice autobiography, and theirs were so profoundly different. Well, in some ways, some of my students had really hard lives, campus-based students, but the incarcerated essays were just packed with injustices in their family, first and foremost, into the school system, into the juvenile court system, into abuse within religion and the military, and all the way up to the criminal punishment system. So I started talking to a gentleman. His name's Ivan Kilgore. He's a wonderful, intelligent man serving life without parole up in Solano Prison. He wrote an excellent book called Domestic Genocide, and he was part of my class at Salinas Valley Prison. He's now been transferred, as I said, up to a different prison in Solano, California. But we started talking about offering this writing prompt to incarcerated individuals all around the nation. So we did just that. I'm not sure how he got the word out to every prison in the United States, but boy, the essays started coming into my mailbox at UC Santa Cruz, and next thing you know, we had 200 or 300 essays from all around the nation, written by men, women, everybody. And some of them were 10 pages, some of them were 2 pages, almost all of them were handwritten. So I got my army of students that were committed to going into prison with me on tours and doing these book exchanges to start typing them out and editing them. We did that over the course of about 6 months. We were trying to write everybody back. That was a really trying process. Ivan was involved in the process, but tangentially because he was, incarcerated. But he ended up connecting with a group of doctoral students up at Stony Brook University, I believe in New York. And they ended up taking on the project as their dissertation research. They analyzed the essays. They chose 24 of the most powerful ones to be illustrative of all the inequities we have here in the United States. And that's what turned into this compilation of social justice autobiographies. I wrote the foreword given my role in the program, and it's just come out in Amazon, I think, a couple days ago. What you'll see in those essays is that every single person within the prison system has come from households full of neglect, abuse, addiction issues, fostering, many fatherless homes. Many incarcerated individuals come from families where there's been an incarcerated parent or another child or a sibling. So there's really, it's hard to say there's just one individual in prison that doesn't come from some sort of trauma in their past. And that's what you're going to see in these essays. They're hard to read. Not all of them talk about their offense that led them into prison, but all of them touch on the various ways the justice system has failed them, whether it be being molested by their aunt for 5 years and calling CPS and nobody ever showing up, to telling a teacher that, their father's abusing them and still no answer. So these people have reached out for help over and over again. And for whatever reason, people have denied them that assistance. And next thing you know, they commit a crime. So I consider these individuals in prison people that we've failed as a society, and it's really our duty to help them heal, because we didn't do that from the past when they needed the help the most.
Yeah, no, that sounds super profound. And honestly, again, it sounds like another very humanizing experience. And it's a great opportunity to let other people who are not necessarily intimately involved in the prison system to know that these people are living their own lives and they have their own struggles, they have their own traumas that led up to this moment. It's not, they don't just wake up one day and decide, hey, I'm just going to go to prison. Like, there's a lot that goes on from the moment they're born, how they're socialized, And it's great that this book is giving people an opportunity to kind of see their deeper experiences, how they feel from their own perspective, especially from a clinician point of view, because that's, what we do for our program as therapists.
Yeah.
Um, Last week, you mentioned some very sobering statistics, and we were just talking about approximation. You said approximately almost maybe like 95%, maybe around that number of juveniles would not reoffend if they had mental health services when they exited prison. And you also said that one of the largest prisons in regarding mental health issues only gives their inmates about like 15 minutes of therapy a month.
Mhm.
What do you believe are some necessary first steps in alleviating some of the mental health issues in our prison system?
Well, you nailed it there, just by offering more therapists, more social workers, more counselors within the different detention centers, whether it be immigrant detention centers or juvenile detention centers. I believe we need to start young. So addressing mental health issues in juveniles. So many incarcerated men started in the system at 13, 14, 15, 16 years old. And it became just a turnstile of going in and out because they didn't get the assistance they needed within the juvenile system when they were younger. So we definitely need to hire more counselors and therapists, mental health workers, social workers within the system to offer people therapy on a daily basis, especially on yards like I'm running my program on, which is it's now called a non-designated yard, but in the past it's been the special needs yard, SNY. Almost every prison has one. This is where prisoners are housed when they're not safe on the main line or in the general population, and those tend to be individuals with the sex offenses, individuals who have snitched or want to get out of the gang politics on the main line, individuals who identify as LGBTQ. So a lot of people that come in with a sex offense don't feel comfortable talking to a social worker or a counselor or a therapist about their crime, because they are so ashamed, and there's so much stigma around crimes related to sex offenses against children or women, or anything in that category. So we do need to release some of the stigma around crimes like that and open up conversations, whether there's a hierarchy of crime in prison. So if you've murdered somebody or committed a robbery or an arson or something like that, it's seen much less heinous and pernicious than a sex offense. So releasing some of the stigmas around that and just opening up the conversation and bringing in more people, especially for youth, to start helping them work out their trauma, and really bringing in people like I do from the public that are going to open their arms to these individuals and show them that no matter what you've done in your past, like, we believe in positive transformation and growth for the future if you have the right tools. So it's all about giving them the right tools to move forward, to have successful lives in society and not reoffend. Because ultimately we're all about public safety, in the program. We don't want anybody coming out that's not ready to be, a healthy member of society.
And you just briefly right now spoke to some of the more damaging stereotypes surrounding incarcerated individuals. What would you say are some of the more damaging stereotypes, and how could the average person or our viewers respond to ignorant stereotypical messages?
I think probably the most powerful stereotype is just that, but when people get out of prison, they're worse than when they came in. I think that used to be true, to be honest. But at least in California, and I know a lot of prison workers around the United States as I go to a national conference, and there's a lot of people really committed to bringing higher education into prison, bringing rehabilitation programs, helping when people get out of prison. There's a small army of us out there, but that are trying to make prison a better place for people that are in it, or abolish it completely, if that's practical. I think that's one of probably the worst stereotypes, is that people come out worse than when they came in. Prisons right now, as I was alluding to in California, are transitioning into being much more rehabilitative. So I got to give props to California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation. They've been putting a lot of money, millions and millions of dollars into these programs. There's so many programs in prisons in California focused on rehabilitation that they just don't have space to house us. So I was talking to people the other day, we got to start building more buildings, because if they want to focus on rehabilitation, we need more space to run all these programs. I think people have the stereotype that prisoners are really violent, as I talked about before, that they're incapable of change, or that they simply deserve revenge and punishment because of the nature of their crime. I think the only way to get around those stereotypes and misconceptions is to confront the injustice face to face. So Brian Stevenson, as I said, wrote Just Mercy, also did the film. He's considered a modern day hero. He's a civil rights lawyer. He says there's 4 things necessary to confront injustice in America. One is getting close to whatever issue you're passionate about. The second is changing the narrative. The third is fighting hopelessness. And the last is getting uncomfortable. He talks a lot in his work about getting proximate to things you care about. So if you care about, or you're curious about why people go into prison and what incarcerated people are like, what the prison system's like, what's it feel like to sit in a cell, then you got to go inside one way or another, as a volunteer, as a worker, as a therapist. But that's really the only way, right, to truly understand the issue and to truly understand individuals that are suffering in silence in these prisons is to get close, get proximate. And I think you'll find there's so much hope when you start doing that. You have to get uncomfortable. It's not comfortable in prison. I'm never comfortable. It's cold, it's dark, there's bells and whistles going off all the time. There's shackles. But once you get close to the issue, you can start changing the narrative. You can start changing people's minds, and you can start to understand that people coming out of prison have done their time. They've done their work. They go to the parole board, the commissioners, and they're found suitable, and that's enough. And once they're out, we should begin to start seeing them that as individuals that really did transform and are ready to be contributing members of society.
Wow.
Sorry, a little long-winded.
No, that was great. I wrote down the 4 things you said in order to confront injustice in our society if other people want to do it. And the first one is to get close. The second one is to change the narrative. Third one being fight hopelessness. And the fourth one is to be getting uncomfortable. Is that correct?
Yep, perfect.
And it just, it reminds me of like the central theme behind my program of me training to be a clinician or a therapist is curiosity. One of the first articles that we read very early on in my program was how to counsel someone who has drastically different views than you. And at the end of the day, you want to just take their perspective and try to understand their life story through their perspective. And that curiosity and that understanding typically breaks down those fears of ignorance, or even like sentiment of I want revenge. I want them to have justice. I want them to, sit in prison because of what they're done. But as soon as you start getting that empathy, it seems like all of that kind of, righteous vengeance and anger and fear slowly starts to melt away. So I think that's a great.
That's right. Very well said.
And just to speak more about incarcerated writing and incarcerated art, when we were having a conversation last week, you mentioned that you had an incarcerated art program. Could you talk more about like the physical design art that you were talking about?
So part of my center is I always love to collaborate with other nonprofits or organizations or individuals that are passionate about going inside prison and revealing the voices and the talents of the incarcerated population. So I did just that. Well, I do a couple things. So I do collect art in the form of beadwork or mobiles, dream catchers, paintings, of course, incarcerated writing. And I have displayed some of it on my website. You can find a lot of their paintings under incarcerated art. When I do have an actual physical center, I will be framing all the paintings and hanging up artwork and putting out the different essays of thematic essays that I have in various binders, and I'll have various books for sale. I have a lot of books from incarcerated authors from all around the nation that have sent me their work. Just yesterday, I got a card in the mail. When one incarcerated man named Richard made me this. It's a kind of a 3D card with a couple of jailbirds. Love jailbirds, and it says freedom begins from within. So this is a really cool 3D card he made for my center. But a couple weeks ago, I collaborated with an organization called Life on Earth Art. They're based out of Marin County, California, and they do art activism. So their project now is to bring incarcerated individuals in my program. There was about 70 of them last session. These hearts that they made out of wood, the men painted the hearts. We asked the question based on the acronym why. What happened to you? Who or what has helped you, and who or what is healing you? We gave them various prompts around that. We gave them a prompt thinking about their past in relation to their future. So however they wanted to design their hearts in a way that really showed their heart and their story, that's what they did in our first session. And then the second session, the individual from Life on Earth Art brought these transparent feathers, and the men painted them and designed them in a way that again represented their identity. All of this is going to come together as like a giant 9-foot paper mache heart with the feathers coming off of it, and it'll be a display at the Marin County Civic Center from early August to the end of October. And there's expected to be about 1,000 people per day that'll see these hearts and this artwork. It's going to be projected up there at the Civic Center along with a film of us doing this art project. And then the incarcerated voices are going to be projected on the screen. They all wrote sentences about themselves that they wanted the public to know about them. So that'll be it. We're doing it again in about 6 weeks. So altogether, there'll be about 200 art pieces from the men at Soledad on display up there in Marin County. So if you're in the area, come check it out.
Wow, that's very impressive, very cool. And it seems like having this physical means of expressing themselves really allowed these people who probably have never had the opportunity to express themselves just flow freely, giving them these prompts, giving them something to work on with their hands so that they're a little distracted. It's very smart. It's very brilliant.
Yeah, they loved it. They said it was one of the more powerful sessions they'd had. And I also brought in some volunteers from the public to oversee the project. I had about 14 people with me, and also from Life on Earth Art. And it was just really cool to see that it was these long tables. There was about 25 people per table. And there was the brothers in blue, as we call them at Soledad. And then the volunteers from the outside were all mingling and sitting together and painting together. And it was like being in class. It was just a very sort of informal, natural experience. And that's something, the incarcerated men really miss, just this normal feeling of socializing and laughing and creating. So that was beautiful to see unfold.
And like you said earlier, it really does seem like you're building this safe communal space for healing and transformative growth.
Yeah.
We're unfortunately running a little low on time, and I just wanted to ask one last question,
Sure.
just to wrap everything up. How can the public serve the mission of the Transformative Justice Center?
I would just encourage everybody. I mean, if you're in California or you feel like coming this way, I would love to have people join my program. You can look it up at transformativejusticecenter.org. Otherwise, find avenues within your local community to, if you're interested in learning with the incarcerated, if you're committed to prison reform, prison abolition, prison transformation is more what I feel is realistic. Then find a local group that you can go into prison with, find a volunteer organization, maybe a reentry organization. Try to get to know people that are coming out of prison to release any kind of fears or stigmas. These individuals need places to live, they need jobs, they need ways to stay out of trouble. They themselves come out of prison with so much shame and fear and trauma, so acknowledge that. I encourage everybody just to live some sort of life of service, because honestly, I know that is where you'll find the most joy, whether it's as a volunteer or paid work. Find something you're passionate about and go with it. I'll have to tell you, like, the most fulfilling part of my week is when I spend 2 hours inside Soledad on Monday nights. Sometimes we don't feel like going in, sometimes we're tired, sometimes we don't feel like doing the work with them. But you show up and you get in there, and we all leave with this higher vibration, this buzz of like, how we really connected deeply with people that most people don't think are deserving of anything. And it just becomes this really beautiful, transformative experience. So I just encourage you to confront your fears, get uncomfortable, do the hard work, and commit yourself to fighting hopelessness and changing the narrative of fear and anger that's rooted in this country's history.
Getting uncomfortable and fighting hopelessness. It's a good little bow to wrap it up everything on. And thank you very much for coming and sharing your experiences and your expertise with us. We really appreciate you here. I believe now it's the question Q&A portion.
Welcome back, everybody. We're here for our Q&A. Excuse me. And I want to check in with our production team members to see if there are any questions. LinkedIn? No questions on LinkedIn? Facebook?
Yes. Could you please reiterate the 4 ways that you can make a difference?
Yes. So Brian Stevenson says, well, he says, I'll read a couple of his quotes. The true measure of our commitment to justice, the character of our society, our commitment to the rule of law, fairness, and equality cannot be measured by how we treat the rich, the powerful, the privileged, and the respected among us. The true measure of our character is how we treat the poor, the disfavored, the accused, the incarcerated, and the condemned. So that's part of, the mission is to really, we should judge ourselves as a country and as a society, not, again, as he says, on how we treat people who already have all the means to be successful, but how we treat people that need a hand, how we treat people that need us to help them get home, so to speak. And to do that, to confront injustice, to confront the incarcerated, to confront the condemned, and actually make a difference, you have to do 4 things. Get close to the issue, change the narrative, fight the hopelessness that you're going to find within any population that needs a marginalized population that needs a hand, and get uncomfortable. This work's not comfortable. You don't go into prison to feel comfortable, but you go into prison to help other people feel more comfortable. You go out and you work with the homeless to help them feel more comfortable, not so you feel more comfortable, but ultimately you'll feel that inner joy, that knowing that you've made an impact on somebody's life, and ultimately they made more of an impact on your own.
And can you repeat those one more time? Just a little slower, make sure we got those.
So you got to get close to the issue, change the narrative, fight hopelessness, and get uncomfortable.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any additional questions from Facebook?
Yes, I was curious about how you choose the literature and, essentially like the course for your program.
Yeah, great question. So I do come from a sociology background, so that has heavily affected what I chose and how I went about creating the curriculum. So I'll just briefly go over, as I said, the program's 8 weeks. We start week 1, which is an introduction. Most of the men that come inside the space where we hold the program don't really know why they're there. They know they signed up to be in conversation with people from the outside. Every time we walk through the yard, there's 1,000 men we walk by and they're yelling, "What program is this? What program is this?" Because they all want to be part of this program where I'm bringing in 30 people from the public. So there's a very lengthy wait list, but then once they get in there, it's like, what am I doing here? So the first night we usually read a poem. It could be, I love the poem, The Invitation. We've read stuff from What Happened to You by Oprah Winfrey. I do excerpts from books, but we start with just an introduction, a poem, and we get into circles we call families. So I usually have 8 to 10 families with about 3 volunteers and about 8 to 10 brothers in blue. I have 8 weeks of the program. We start with the introduction, and I always pair each week with a virtue or a value. So that first week we dig into love. One of my favorite quotes that I created is, "Love or lack thereof is the reason for everything in this world." So we really try to understand that people in prison have never really received the love they needed growing up, and we're there to really bring it. So that's the first week. Second week, we get into empathy and transformative justice, the roots of the program. And I chose a reading from Empathy, Why It Matters, And then I have a bunch of academic literature on transformative justice that I included in the reader. The third week, which we're starting on Monday, we get into conflict transformation and relationship patterns.
Good.
So understanding our way we respond to conflict, understanding the way we engage in our relationships, and the patterns is a big topic, because many of us, no matter how much we don't want to be like our parents or the people that brought us up, end up being like them in some ways,
Right.
Especially our conflict styles. So we're going to talk a lot on Monday about pausing, the difference between responding and reacting to something. And what we teach in breath work is holding the breath, like retaining the breath for a minute, and really looking at that pause. And I'm going to teach the men that it's in that pause that you actually have a choice. You have options. So when we pause in a conflict, that's when the options and the choices open up. If you just react, you don't have any choices. You impulsively did something. So that's what we get into with conflict. And the theme I pair there is forgiveness. The fourth week, we explore trauma, our personal traumas. The readings are, again, mainly coming from academia around PTSD, and the virtue there is courage. The fifth week, we get into exploring societal inequities and harms, and the theme there is accountability from society and individuals. The fifth week, coming from my sociological background, we delve into gender inequality, toxic masculinity, themes like that. And the theme there is kindness. And then I always have them create an intention around these virtues for the week to focus on. The seventh week, we talk about race and racism. This is a big week. This is also what I call Friends and Family Week. So I always allow volunteers to bring in somebody they're close to share the program with and their experience. And that week, we delve into acceptance. And then the eighth week is really awesome. This is when all the men and the volunteers stand up in front of each other and do a creative performance. It can be a song, a dance, a painting, a poem. It's a really fun night of 2 hours of performance. And I do a certificate ceremony. I bring in about 20 pizzas from Costco, and we break bread together, and everybody's laughing. And it's just a really, really joyous night. And the theme that night is justice, empowerment, and worth. So yeah, the readings all come from different books from my sociological background, a lot of kind of more yogic readings. So they kind of span the spectrum, but that's the curriculum, and is how the program is kind of rolled out.
All right, great. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Let's see, YouTube. Jackson?
Hi, we have one question from YouTube. What self-care practices do you engage in outside of your professional duties to reduce fatigue, burnout, and vicarious trauma?
Thank you. That's a great question. I'm a big proponent of self-care, or self-devotion, I rather would call it. I myself love to exercise, so getting outdoors, going on a run or a hike. I live about a half mile from the beach, so running on the beach or on the beach trail, going in the forest, taking a bike ride. Probably my favorite sport is swimming. Swimming's quite meditative, so just going out there and swimming laps for an hour and a half, I end up thinking through a lot of issues and problems and worries and anxieties, and I plan my course in the water. Beyond, getting outdoors and moving my body, sweating, I follow a plant-based diet. I think it's really important to nourish yourself in a way where you feel healthy and vibrant and alive. One of our mission of the center is to really work for a cage-free society. So whether that's individuals in prison or animals in factory farms, I don't support any of it. Your diet's really important for self-care. And then as I mentioned, I love yoga, not only asana, stretching, but karma yoga, living a life of service, bhakti yoga, living a life of loving kindness, Raja yoga, studying, reading healing books. I have about 20 books on next to my bed, all around kindness and forgiveness and empathy. Some are some pretty good fictions. And then just spending time with people you love and that love you. That's all gonna account to your overall wellness and happiness and stability. If you're doing a job where you're expected to show up in a way that's healing and present, then you really do need to do that work within yourself so you can do that on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, I agree. I know so well.
Yep. The common saying, I learned this in the GRIP program, is hurt people, and healed people,
Yes.
heal people.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to be a healer, then you really got to heal yourself first. And hey, we're never all the way there, but just work on having that real inner joy and confidence so you can show up for people and help them on their healing path.
Absolutely. All right, those are our questions, and we want to leave the last couple of minutes to you to reiterate any points that you wanted to make, maybe some things that you didn't get to say during the regular segment. So we will turn the floor back over to you, Megan, for final comments, even if you want to make announcements about any activities happening at the center in the future, your books, resources, seminars, or workshops.
Sure. Well, I wrote this piece on a medium.com called Prisoners' Lives Matter. It's about 8 pages. So I'm not going to read the whole thing, but I wanted to read the conclusion. And yeah, you can look it up on medium.com, Prisoners' Lives Matter. I do encourage people to check out my book, Social Inequalities. You can look up my name, Megan McDrew, on Amazon. It should come right up. Social Justice Autobiographies. And yes, please check out my center, transformativejustice.center.org. I'm just trying to start fundraising. I'm taking donations. We're trying to create a documentary for the program, about a 30-minute documentary. And then I do hope to be able to lease a space here in Monterey County so I can provide these trauma-informed wellness services and hire more staff. But I'll say here, by and large, prisoners are suffering in silence and fear all across our nation. They live in contaminated filth and disgrace, while I believe the rest of our country believes our safety rests on the unfreedom of others. I will tell you one final thing, and it is this: our safety and security rests in fixing the many broken institutions we have in this country, beginning with the family, supporting families, supporting children that are in foster care or in families where both parents are working all the time. Where the neighborhoods are full of gangs. Also looking at fixing schools, the church, the military, the government, and certainly last but not least, the prison industrial complex and mass incarceration. Releasing the millions of people who are caged in this country will not harm you or your children, especially if we insist that prisoners are treated with dignity, with a direct focus on rehabilitation, restorative justice, equity, and accountability. There's this disability rights movement. One of their common mottos or slogan is "Nothing for us without us." So I believe the 2.3 million people that are incarcerated in this country are part of the solution and need to be heard, seen, and released, finally set free from the system of punishment that is nothing but cruel, harmful, racist, classist, and an ever-growing stain on this country, both historically and now. My call is to transform prisons into places of justice, transparency, accountability, and ultimately love. So that's what we're trying to do in Empathy in Action. I would love to bring the program all across the nation. The biggest lift is just getting volunteers and people from the public to come into prison and see what a transformative learning experience it is. I promise a safe space to grow and to assist other people in their growth. So thank you so much for the opportunity to share my work in this program and to be a voice for the incarcerated, because they deserve, as I said, to be seen and heard just like everybody else.
Kavan, thank you so much for being an awesome interviewer today. Your very first one. Great job.
Yeah, you did excellent.
Thank you very much. Thank you for being a great first guest. Thank you very much. Appreciate
it. You made it easy. Thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah. This has been wonderful. Thank you so much to our Justice Beat family for hitting the road with us again for our 7th season, episode 1. We will be back on the 3rd Saturday at 10 a.m. Central Standard Time. So let me recap for you for a moment. The Justice Beat Talk Show is on the 1st and 3rd Saturdays of the month at 10 a.m. The Just Us Youth Talk Show, which focuses on juveniles, is on the 2nd and 4th Saturdays at 10 a.m. Again, thank you for joining us.